All right, let's kick off and look at our next chapter, which is switching configuration. So probably the best thing to do is jump in and configure switch up. And I'll jump between both our packet tracer and a real switch that I've got attached somewhere. I'll just see if I can make that all happy that it wants to go both sides. How does that look from space? It might not be particularly clear. I will endeavour to zoom in, but I do end up chunking it a little bit down the bottom, and I have to then scroll across. So it will become a little bit sort of back and forth, but we'll see how we go. So I've got my computer behind me. That's not too bad. All right, so what are the things we want to config on a switch? What sort of things do we want to set up? We'll put name, we'll do a host name. VLANs we'll do next week or the week after. So we can definitely do them. I don't mind intermixing some of this stuff, especially if you're doing the enterprise network unit. I think a few of you are. Have you guys had to do any VLANs yet, or do you do them soon? Oh, okay, so this is our week 5, so maybe 2 more weeks. So it does time in. I think they rearrange the units sequence so that we don't go sort of back to front on those, but we can definitely have a little bit of a look at them. Alrighty, so we'll do some config. First name, we'll call it CIT. Okay, when you say inputs, what do we mean by inputs? What sort of things do we want to set up? Console VTY and some user access. So let's set up some user access. Now, it doesn't really matter which I do. I don't mind going live because we'd be doing this in the lab, so this is as close as we can do to hands-on. I'm not sure how much you guys have config switches up at all. Has anyone done any switch config apart from basics? Okay, so what we'll do now is the same sort of thing. So if we do a do show run without the space, and then we sort of scroll up and have a bit of a look at our switch, I might just undock it because it's just not going to do exactly what I want from jumping around. That might be a bit easier to look at. Bear with me. Okay, so we first load our switch up. What's it do? What's the first, from hardware operation, what's the first thing a switch does when you turn it on, when you give power? So power on self-test, which is basically just powering it on and finding out that there is hardware attached. Then what does it run from the post? It runs a special file. It is your bootloader, affectionately known as your bootstrap. So we're trying to find anything to do with our bootstrap up in our information that's coming up. Now mine's jumping around a little bit because I've zoomed in. So we want to, it is from ROM. It's you can actually flash them in using your ROM-mon commands, etc. But it's the actual bootloader program is then just looking for what is connected from the point of view of ports and storage, and what we'd like to know with our ports and storage is what sort of stuff. What are we trying to find with our ports and our storage? Just seeing if I can get what I want it to be without it. It's just hard because I've zoomed in. So we've got our boot sector system installed. We've got a base MAC address. How many MAC addresses will a switch have? Because it's got a MAC address here. How many MAC addresses will a switch have? It'll have its base, and it'll have a MAC address for every single port, correct? So for us, we've got 24 ports, and we've also got 2 gig ports. So we'll have 27 MAC addresses for this switch as a 24-port switch. Anyone know what X modem is? X modem's a copy utility that you can recover your system if you get a catastrophic failure. You can put up some basic commands and it will write your operating system across. We have a password recovery mechanism, which means we can hotkey in if we have physical access, and we can get around a password and reset it. Then we're initializing flash. So when it's initialized flash, and it says it's loading flash, and then we've got all of these little @ symbols, what is that actually doing? It's loading the iOS, so not the startup config. So the terms you might be confused with, the config is in NVRAM, and that's what we're going to type, which is our changes. But this is actually our base operating system. And these little ats are it unzipping. So it is a zipped file, which you can see. I'm not sure how clear that highlight is. Clear enough. The MZ means it's a zipped file. It's a binary file. And we've got a flash, which means that's the physical location. We've got a C2960, which is our hardware set. We've got a K9, which is our feature set. It's just a basic operating system. And then we've got our version, 12.2, with a revision of 58. And then we've got a binary file. So when it's loaded, if you don't have your iOS in your flash, it will do a couple of things. Where will it actually go as a sequence? So if there's no iOS in your flash, it will try and find iOS where. And a router is similar as a sequence. It will go and look for a TFTP server, because you don't actually have to have your operating system stored locally. It means you can go to a centralized server, especially if you've got many devices, and you can have a single operating system you can pull down. And then after it goes to your TFTP server, if you have no operating system, it will revert into a ROM-on mode, which gives you a basic feature set of commands where you can copy an operating system across. I might make a little video, or I'll post a YouTube already made video on that process. It's pretty good to do. You can do it in Packet Tracer. as well, so we can go and look at that process. Though we do it for routers, and we do it a little bit later with our maintenance. So we've got an operating our software 12.2 that's been loaded up, and then as we slowly look through what we've got, let me see if I can just do this without. All right. So we're looking at the size, and I've zoomed in as much as I can with this little utility. So for me, I've got 32 million bits. So it's 32 meg. So it's pretty small, really. I've used about half of it, and I've got about half of it left. Can I run multiple operating systems from my single flash? As in, can I store them and then load them up separately? Yes, I can. So I can just file path it in my commands to say use this version or use this version. It's to do with upgrades, development, and production. So I can test before I go live and then break stuff, or I can do incremental testing to get things working. So if I know that I've got an operating system that's smaller than 17 meg, I can go and load 2. If it was, say, 20 meg, I wouldn't be able to load 2 in. And you have to be careful about, can I expand my flash? Yes, you can put more flash in if you need to. So as we go down, we're just doing basic memory testing. Then it's loading the don't pirate this software legal command. Now, this is interesting for us because we're interested in our interfaces. And we've got some base memory, which is our RAM. And then we've got our NVRAM as well, which is in here, non-volatile configuration. So our NVRAM versus our RAM, the operating system gets loaded into RAM. And Cisco asks you really pedantic questions like, when a switch is running, where is the operating system operating from? And you always think it's an iOS running from flash, but it gets loaded into RAM. So it runs from RAM. It gets stored in flash. So a play on words, but it's technically correct as well. So it loads the iOS into our RAM. Can you upgrade your RAM? Yes, you can. You've got a one virtual Ethernet interface, which we're interested in. We've got 24 fast Ethernet interfaces, and we've got 2 gigabit. And then we're going to go down and look at our non-volatile RAM. And then we've got, as I slowly get down, some of my config that I've looked at. I've got a host name of CIT, and I'm slowly going down here. I've got my 24 Ethernet ports, my 2 gigabit, my virtual interface. I can run this as a HTTP server. I've got my line con, and I've got my VTY, which is my telnet or SSH. So we'll go and configure some of these things up. Let's go and configure up our passwords, etc. So I type in enable. I can type in my enable password and put a carriage return. I can specify a level if I'd like to. Those levels are user defined. So it says 0 specifies unencrypted password, 7 specifies hidden password will follow. So if we don't put anything in, it in theory will give us a 0 just by default in there. So if I put in here class, and then if I go exit WR, and if I type in then exit, return to get started doesn't prompt me for a password. So what password, just for a little bit of clarification, what password, what will prompt me to get that password of Cisco? Enable. So if I type in enable, I'll get prompted, and I put in class password, Now I'm going to config this up again. I actually want to put in a stronger type of password, because if I do show run, if I zoom up the top here, it's just a matter of where I can find it. Jumps around. I'm just trying to find my enable password that I am having trouble trying to locate it. There it is, enable password class. So there's no encryption on that. It's low level. It's for older devices. If I want to put a stronger type of password onto that, what would I type to supersede or to use without that? Okay, I'll put a secret in. Enable secret. And I'll call this one, say, Cisco. And I will NWR that. If I exit, what password now? Is it going to be class or is it going to be Cisco? So my first password was class from my enable. Okay, let's try it. So if I type in class, it doesn't allow it, because a secret will supersede or it will trump through hierarchy a secret. So why would you ever put in an enable password? Old operating systems don't have secret. So as the only option you have, you put in enable. If you do have the option, you don't put enable in, you put a secret in. If you put both in, the secret will trump the enable. Hopefully that clarifies things that people didn't know, because I find that people get confused with that. Now, I want to stop people from initial entry into this. I don't want them to be able to go, question mark. Hey, I've got all these things I could do. So I could do a show, and I've got no passwords on this yet. So I can show the clock, I can show IP, I can show network, monitor. I can show a lot of stuff, which is good, but bad. So how am I going to stop people from getting in initially? Interface do I want to lock off? Okay, my console, which is what I've connected through my serial port in, and I'm just going to zoom out for a second because this will drive me insane. I'm just going to find, here we go, it snuck to my other screen. I plugged my USB in and I went to my device manager and I went down to my COM, and it says to COM8 I have something attached through this serial. So how did I connect to my COM8 using what software? I've just got to find where I put it up here. So in my putty here, I've got, if I can, I might have to log out to log back in. Yeah, sure. I'll kill it off and I'll get back in. So if I go and load putty up, which is on my other screen, which I'm not sharing. This is my terminal emulation software where I can enter. So what settings do I do here to enter my switch or router from initial settings? So this is live equipment. This is not packet tracer. And this is what we would be doing in the lab, which is the hands-on stuff. So this is as close as I can make it as hands-on. Okay, so at the moment it's SSH port 22. I've got raw, telnet, rlogin SH and serial. So serial for us is USB. It used to be the old DB9 serial interfaces, which look a little bit like a VGA, but it's the reverse. And by default, it's COM1. So if you're not sure what COM it is, you look it up. And for us, it was COM8. And I've got default settings. If you're not sure what they are, you need to go and load or change those. But they will be the baud rate, which is 9600, which is 9600 bits per second. I can't type quicker than that, so there's no point in having it quicker than that. And we don't do a whole lot of upload speed through our console unless we're using things like Xmodem. So I would change that as fast as I could if I was doing a iOS upgrade, etc. Now the tricky thing with PuTTY is when you first enter, you don't think you're connected. It's looking for a line for it to prompt the router or the switch. So if you hit enter is where you'll see it go into action. So if it does seem like it's hanging, it needs the polling effect of a carriage return or a key press for it to verify that you're in. So again, let's go up and config our con. So hopefully that was useful for no one who's used PuTTY. You can download PuTTY for free. You can use it for other things as well. It's quite useful. All right, so how do we configure our console port? It's a line port. It's a console, and I have one of them, which is my 0. I do have routers and equipment that have multiple consoles, so I have to enter in 0 or 1. On my line of action, I've got a lot of commands I can put into this device. It's a lot larger than what you'll see in Packet Tracer. But for all intensive purposes, we want to secure it and allow access. So let's put in a password, and we'll put in class just for the sake of it. And I have to now allow that process to occur. So how do I activate my password? Okay, so log in. Now there's another word that looks like it called logging. People sometimes get confused, but it's login. That's like the no shut to bring the interface up. You won't see it come up because it's a virtual interface in itself. So now if I end and write that and then exit, if I hit enter now, it's now prompting me for a password. So that password is my console password to begin with. My enable password is my secret. For this case, it was Cisco. So I've typed in class and then Cisco. Now, there are other ways you can get into this switch. How else can I get into this switch to either hack it or secure it? Telnet SSH. And there's one more access port that I can get into. May not actually be on this. I'll just get my switch on the back here. No, it's on my router. Yeah, it'll be my AUX, my auxiliary port. Does anyone know what we plug into an AUX for us to get access? So typically you dial in using the AUX, your auxiliary, and that would be a modem. So that's a backup way that you can prompt to get into your router or switch to bring it back alive. Now, this switch doesn't have an AUX, so that's all good. So my console access is called, is it either in band or out of band for config's perspective? My console, is it in my network or is it not in my network? Because I'm going to say that my telnet is in band, which means it's in my network, which means I can get to it using network traffic. So console is out of band, that's correct. It seems counterintuitive because it's the first way you get into a router, but make sure you know the difference. So let's config that up. So line VTY, which is our virtual. Now it's got 0 to 15. What does that give reference to? The 0 to 15. Okay, the amount of connections that are concurrently available. That's right, and they are called sessions. So that means you can host how many sessions with that number given concurrently at once. You could have X amount of people. You can have 16 people telnetting into your switch or router. To me, that seems a little excessive. So you probably don't want that. If you put 0, that would give you 1. That would be a little bit restrictive for in case you had multiple people needing to config it up. So let's just say we needed 4, just for a example. What would I type in here? Would I type in 4? Okay, you've got to put a range. So 0 counts as the first, and up to 3, because you count 0, will give you 4. Hopefully that clarifies things for people that didn't know. You do not always have to put 0 to 15 in. Typically, 3 or 4 gives you multiple access and always an admin as a reserve that you can get back in if you're locked out. The difficulty with sessions is if you don't close a session, someone can actually hijack an open session and basically get into your equipment. So never leave your telnet, well, you never have telnet, but your SSH sessions open. Always terminate them. So it's the same process of we're going to type in a password and we'll log that in. So how am I going to get access in band or through my network into my switch? What else do I have to configure? So this is telnet. I'll get to SSH later. Let's just park that. Sure, I can log in local if I need to. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong mode. We can log in, but at this point in time, I'm just going to say I can get into it. So, do I need to type the local there? I can. Yep, I can do the transport input SSH stuff in a minute. Let's just see how we can access this from the point of view of I've got a device and it'll allow me in band to access my switch. Username and password. I've got a password. I don't have a username, so that's interesting. We might have to make a username. IP config. I will definitely have to configure my poor old layer 2 device to be contactable, and it has to go down a stack, so you can't jump layer 3. You still have to have an entity that works. So telnet runs at what port, which is layer 4? 23. So we're running a telnet session. We can get down to layer 4. We need to go to layer 3, and then it'll go to layer 2. And we saw the layer 2 address. So I've got this stuff set up. So let's go and set up an IP. Do I have an IP? Sorry. I have IP. Then after that, I can type in, I've got an address pool and an admission, so I can't put in an address. If I go to an interface, I can't type in IP address. So where am I putting my address? Okay, I can't put it on a physical. Why not? I can put it on a virtual. Why can't I put an IP address on a physical port? It's a layer 2 switch. Can I make my switch layer 3? Okay, I can if it's a layer 3 switch. I can just turn on routing and it'll route for me, but this one doesn't have that capability. This is a 29. I'll need a 30 series to do that. So let's get off that interface. And int VLAN 1. So how am I going to get on that? Int VLAN 1? Question mark. Got lots of stuff. Hey, I've got an IP there. I can put an address on there. And I can just type it in. Now, I've already got an address set on my computer. So I'm 192.168.0 and I'm 99. So let's make this one 1 just for fun. And I haven't masked it out. Secondary, I can put a secondary address on there, which is interesting in itself. So I've got an IP address and I want to bring that interface up. VLAN 1, put a no shut on it. If you do a shut, you don't see the active interface. If you make a different VLAN, you can shut and no shut those as well. So if it's not functional and not happy, definitely try the no shut. That looks good. So can I ping my device? Let me zoom out. This is my PC. That's my Ethernet adapter. And I am 099, so I should be able to ping my switch. If I can ping my switch, I've got connectivity. So can I actually telnet in? I have telnet running on here. No, so by default, I've got to actually go and run telnet in as a service and command and start that up. And I'll have to go and Google and remember how to do that, or someone can talk me through it. If I don't have telnet running through my command prompt, I'll just zoom in for you. Okay, it says it's not recognized as an internal, external. Can I actually start it up? There should be a way that I can use it. I could putty in, so let's try that. But you can actually run this from your command line as well. So I will exit this session. Oops. And to allow me to break my command. That's annoying. Doesn't matter. All right, so I'll kill my putty out. And we'll see if we can go in and enter our device. So I need to change to telnet, which is my port 23. And throw me onto another page. And I got an error. It says connection refused. So we obviously need to set up some more stuff. Okay, do I need a gateway? I'm on my own local segment and I can ping it. The only way you need a gateway is when you are external to your network, because the gateway is what the switch needs to basically find its way back to you. Was the transport input telnet set up? By default, it is transport telnet, so I don't need to change my transport. The only reason I'd change that is from my telnet to my SSH. I do have a login. I think we mentioned it up before. It's going to prompt me for something when I try and log in, and I've got a password. Yes, I did a shut no shut just to make sure my VLAN was operational, and I could ping it. So if I couldn't ping it, that interface wouldn't be up. These are all excellent questions, by the way. These are very, very good fault finding questions. I'm just going to do a new session, and I'm going to serial back in. See, I'll just drag that here. That one I can just kill out. All right, so let's try username, and we'll just type in admin just for the sake of it. Do we need to be prompted for that? We'll see. Let's just do a show run. I know it's small, but I'm just zooming through this. So bear with me. That's really hard to look at. There's an overlap. So I've got my VTY and I've got a login. I've got a enable password, a secret, which trumps it, which is low-level encryption. And I will have a username now. So we'll see if that does anything for us. I can ping it. If I can ping it, I've got my Ethernet connected from my laptop to my switch. You just have to trust me on that. But at the same time, I should be able to ping me. Ooh, sorry. I'm going to do that because I'm 99. And my hotkey break is not wanting to break. It's strange. Okay, so I'm on my switch. I can ping my PC. My PC can ping me. Therefore, we know we've got connectivity. So we know that it's not a layer 1, 2, or 3 issue. Everyone reasonably happy with the logic. And you can see why I'm doing this process. So if I do a new session concurrently, now I'll see if I can telnet in. And my network connection is refused. Interesting. Okay, doesn't need to be input. Okay, it'll be the login. So let's go back here and we'll configure it. Line VTY03. Login, try local. And we'll see if we can refresh our session here. Restart session. Still confused. Connection refused. Run. Line VTY. Login local. I have a, well, hostname doesn't change what we want it to do. I've got my password that should prompt me. I've got a username. So do you want to try a transport? Someone's mentioning transport. We can try it. Transport, input, telnet. Okay, let's try that. I might have to just kill that. I'll just try a new session because it's kicking me out. Connection is still refused. I'll kill that off. What do you mean by allow the link to be active? If I go to run, I've got VLAN IP address. So that is an active link. I have a login, transport input, telnet. I'm putting all the things you guys are throwing at me. Which is awesome. This is good fun. It gets us thinking. All right, well, let's jump in here just for the sake of wherever our packet tracer switch went. Got no idea where it went. There we go. Let's get you guys to config this up if you've got packet tracer. So what we've done is this. We've hooked up a console link when it wants to hook up. So we've console in. We've also set up a, when it wants to link in, switch port, doesn't matter where that goes. In theory, we've used equivalency of PuTTY. They're the settings. See if you can get yours to go. And we'll repeat the steps from what Cisco's told us. And I'll give you, say, 2 or 3 minutes to see what you get going. When we get that working, we'll just do a bit of revision on our live switch. Then we'll go and Wireshark the password so we can capture it. And then we'll change our clear text password from telnet to SSH, and we'll Wireshark that, and we'll capture that. That's the plan of what we're going to do. And then we'll go and set up a few more settings. So let's give you a couple of minutes to do that. I'll do the same thing here, just so we can repeat it, so people can watch it. Should be all good fun. Okay, so everything we set up, we've got some extra stuff in our live switch because we've put transport input telnet, we've got login local. Well, we didn't need any of those things in our simulation mode. It didn't prompt me for a username. So we've got some interesting issues. Let's try. Shutting it down. And then this time, bear with me. Okay, I just wanted to wrap that out. This time I get a message saying that I've actually changed to down. Let's try and no shut. Okay, now this time I got a message saying it's changed state to up. That's interesting. I didn't get that information. And we'll go back to our real, sorry, I'll have to go back into putty. Oh, I think I killed that session. I'll put a new session together. And we're still getting denied. Oh, someone else wants to join in. Super duper. So that's interesting. So that switch is not allowing us to get in. We've done everything we needed to do. Doesn't matter. Let's not worry about it because as far as I know now, that should be fine. We could actually Wireshark that out and have a bit of a look at that as well, just because. I'm not even getting any telnet activity from my putty. From Wireshark's point of view. So we're not even getting telnet operational. Doesn't matter. Let's go back in. We won't play around that for too long. Oops. Let's go in and set up the way we need to know, because as far as we need to know, everything is set up on here. I wanted to set that up because I wanted to do a Wireshark and capture it. So the fact that it's not working, there's obviously something on my switch that, or my PC, that's not allowing connectivity. Doesn't matter. I took my firewall down just to make sure as well. Let's press on. Let's try and make this secure now. So from the point of view of setting this up, we want to change our transport mode now. So we want to call this our transport input. We're going to set this up as SSH. This is where you do need to have a login local set, and you do need to have a username and a password set. So let's exit out of there. I've got my username as admin, and I can put a password on there. There's a few more things I need to set up for my SSH. Does anyone know what they are? Okay, so domain name. So domain doesn't exist. Okay, IP domain name. Obviously, you can have different domain names for IPv4 and 6. So we'll call ours CIT.com. What else do I have to do? And I've got to generate keys for encryption. Okay, so what sort of keys are they? Obviously, they're encryption keys. So I'm looking for a word of encryption. So I don't have that. So if I type in crypto key, generate, RSA is our type of encryption that it's going to use, which is fairly strong. And I don't care about general keys. I'm just going to create them as my RSA keys. So crypto key generate. And it's saying my modulus is 512. By default, what do we usually change that to? Okay, 1024, which is our 2-bit derivative. And it says that the keys will be non-exportable. So technically I've made a key now. So without that key, you can't get in. And my key is based off my username and password. So it's made my key from that information and it's cryptoed those out. So if I zoom out a little bit and get back into I can save that. Do a show run. We won't see the keys here. They're stored in a different part of the switch itself. It says they're non-exportable. Doesn't mean you can't get them. Doesn't mean you can't do things to them. But I've got a domain name. I've got a username. Got a password. Interestingly, it populated out the 0 for me, which means it's a non-encrypted. So for me, I would have to do a service password encryption so that you would not see that. And then down the bottom, we've now got our transport input. And it says login. Now, I think I need to change that so that it actually finds my local password. Otherwise, you can store passwords, for example, say through Radius, and you have to basically point to your Radius server to check your username and password. Very rarely would you have a local username and password stored on your equipment. That's fairly much a security no-no and a bit of a breach. So Radius is much stronger for you to do that, which is your AAA authentication and access, etc. So just for the sake of what we're doing, well, let's just see if we get bumped out because login doesn't know where to look. Login local actually says go and find the username and password, and you can have multiple of these on here. The privilege number is arbitrary. You can set that, so you can say, well, this admin is low level. It's a silly thing to say. I should have said the username was called, I don't know, John, and his privilege was 1. And then you can actually set up privilege rules that only allow John to do certain things. And then if you set up admin, you can set up a privilege to, I think the default is 15 as the maximum. Again, it's you're naming it. You're not. It doesn't create restrictions. You create restrictions based off the privilege level that you put in. So that's in your CCNA security modules. But because it gets mentioned here, people ask questions about it. So hopefully that answers some of those and makes it a bit more relevant and useful to you anyway. So let's try from here. I'll do it through their little utility. Down the bottom here, they've got an SSH client, which is the same as our putty. Yep. Admin, see if we can connect to that. Allowed us to do it. What's my password here? Good. Run. That's my transport input SSH. Now, because I can't seem to get onto my switch, what I would be doing is looking at the telnet process, finding the password, and then looking at the SSH and showing you that the password has the key on it so that it's encrypted where the telnet is clear text. Oops. Small, but you get the idea. And I zoom in there. Okie dokie. Let's go through our chapter and we'll see what our chapter wants to say to us as well, because we've skipped over a few little things, but we've covered a lot. And my local telnet's got me thinking and confused. We'll have a 5-minute break and I'll play and I'll see if I can fix that. All right, so that's just a little activity to read through. We've done our boot sequence. Yes, you'll be tested on it. So you have to know that you do a power on self-test. It checks your CPU, your RAM, and your flash. It loads the bootloader, which is a little bit of software. Well, it's command sequences in ROM. The bootloader goes and tries to find the flash, and then the flash will load its operating system into RAM. After that, it'll find its NV RAM setting. So we didn't cover that, did we? How do you find an NV RAM setting? How do I find where it's loading NV RAM from? Does anyone know? Okay, it's not in the startup config. Show flash. Okay, let's try a few things. Show flash will show me that I've got, I'll just bring that around a bit. So it doesn't wrap around. It shows me I've got a read-write file. It shows me the file size. And it shows me what the file's called. It shows me I've got config.txt, which is kind of cool. What else can I do to show things? If I go show a version, I've got a config register of OXF. So that will show you as well where it's booting from, which is your configuration file. And that's a hex value. So that can show you the location as well through hex. Let me zoom out a little bit. It'll also show you, where am I? From the show version line. Your memory size, your flash memory, your non-volatile config memory, which is your NVRAM, etc. And it can show you some models and things as well. So that's all useful. So we've booted up. We've got our binary file that's opened up. And it says our config file is stored in NVRAM. And our NVRAM was our 0xF as the config register. And you can change those. So you can boot to ROM-mon, or you can boot using password recovery, etc. The boot environment variable is the boot system. So if we do a show boot, let's go and have a quick look at that. That's showing us that we're loading our config file. Got manual break, manual boot, helpers, auto upgrades. There's just little things you can do with your boots. That's where you can go and set your variances, so you can boot to different files here. This looks pretty similar to what we've just looked at. We don't have extra files in there, but that's all good. Recovering from a crash, because we're not in the lab, can't really do a whole lot of this stuff. But yes, you can press a button on your switch. It will basically hold down and reboot just like a computer will, so that you can bypass password and those sort of things as well. There's some LEDs. Again, because we're not live, this is kind of average to teach it, but we'll go through it. You're going to get green. You're going to get what they call amber, which is our orange. Green, as you can sort of logically put together, is good. Amber is usually a status, and flashing green or flashing amber is telling you something. It's saying, look at me. So if you go to these colors here, if you are green, you are normal. If you are amber, you are not functioning. So that's your system, which is the top. If you've got a redundant power supply, obviously green is good. Amber is waiting for the redundant power supply to kick in. You've got your port status. So default mode, LED is green. If there's no link, there's no color or light. If you're blinking green, you're active and sending data. If you're going green amber, you have an error. If you're amber, you are blocking. Now we know that from, if we go and put another device on here, this should mimic this, where you can see the amber color. Technically, that's blocking that port to check if that's a switch, because otherwise you can get switch loops. So that'll do that for about 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds, depending on what setting you've got for it to set. You can make that go straight into green if you know this is not a switch, which is the sort of stuff we'll set up. Enterprise networks, you guys do that. You do all your spanning tree and those sort of things to set those up using port fast commands. If it's blinking amber, it's blocked. So that's where, if I go and set up 3 switches, actually I can just do it with 2. So if I fast forward that, oops. Killed my session out. If I put another link in here, and then fast forward it, you can see, you can't really see it, but the top 2 are green. The bottom one's green, but the other one's amber. That stops what's called a switch loop. And if I put more and more ports in there, you'll see that they go amber and only allow 1 port switch through. You can put multiples, and you can put your ether channel across that, and your ether channel will allow you to have multiple ports acting as a single port bundle, which gives you throughput. But otherwise, you have to take the link down, which is what it's saying with your amber. Duplex, we'll go and play around a little bit with that. We did that last week, so this is a little bit of revision, so we don't have to go into that. That is when you're communicating, so full versus half, and your port speed is your LED is green, you're 100 meg. If you're blinking green, you're going at a gig. I haven't got a PoE switch here. No, I do not. So I can't show you the PoE modes as well. but that's when you can get power over Ethernet, so you can power phones and all those sort of things. You won't get tested hugely on that. You will in your chapter, but you won't in your final, which I should open up actually to see what they're going to test us on. Basic switch management. Well, we did this. We hooked our console in. We now know that that's our con password for our initial. We did set up our VLAN 1, so we could do our remote management. And there's some setups on these sort of things. Now, someone said default gateway. Let's see if we can go through the logic of the default gateway. So when do you need a default gateway? Bear with me. Let me swap my switch out. I'm just going to put my tablet pen in. Hopefully that gives me a pen. Okay, when do you need a default gateway? This interface will be a default gateway for our network. I need to set up a default gateway on this device. I'll be able to telnet in, no problem, without the default gateway. The only reason I need a default gateway is so that the answer knows which way to go out. So I'll set up on here IP default gateway, and I'm just going to put the address in, 192.168.0. Who cares? 10 will do. This was 99. That was .1. Pretty random as IPs, but so that's when you need to put your gateway in. It's for return traffic only from external network. So this might be a 10 network or the cloud or whatever it is coming through. Does that help answer that about how and why you need a default gateway? Because you do get tested on that. You get a scenario or you'll get a question that says, if you're here, do you need a gateway? The answer is no. Or if you're here, do you need a gateway? And the answer is yes. So there's no gateway required in the first scenario because I've just got direct connection, which just lets me ping and do all the things I need to do. Hopefully that answers that for people. Let me know if it doesn't. We did go and set up our IP. There's a lab, which is awesome. Duplex. Yes, you can go and set up your half and duplex using commands, and they are per interface. So I can go and set up single interfaces or ranges of interfaces. So duplex full. Duplex is different than speed. People often get those confused. Speed is the operating speed. Sometimes you need to back down to 10 and you can run it full, or you can go half. So they're pretty straightforward as commands, and you are, when you do this, on an interface. This is not a general config mode because you're actually doing it to those to get those to talk. So if you've got mismatches and you're getting errors, which was our runts from last week, that's when you'd back things down from duplex to half because it's cutting it through. We covered this last week, Auto MDIX, which is our software crossover. So we've already gone through that. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If you need me to explain it, let me know. Is everyone okay on Auto MDIX? Excellent. Have we run through these commands here? We've done a show start, show run, they're the same sort of thing. We've done a show flash, which is where the location of the file is. We've done a show version, which tells us what, obviously what version it is, but it also shows us our config register. Config register, which is our OXF, which is where you're booting your NVRAM from. NVRAM. We haven't looked at history, but that's just generic. That's on switches and routers. We've done show IP, interface ID. We've done our show VLAN 1. Show MAC address table we did last week. So that should be fairly straightforward for people. Where we went and cleared it and moved our MAC addresses around to look at the process of flooding and broadcasts. So we cleared those out for our commands. Access layer issues. So we did a shut, no shut to make sure that we had those up. We did pinging, which will check our layer 1, 2, 3. You can do direct interfaces to see what errors you're getting with your runts, etc., and your collisions. So if you see this sort of metric coming through and you're getting ridiculous numbers in your collisions and possibly late collisions, that's when you change your duplex and you put it to say half, and or you may want to change your speeds because there's some sort of error in the way that it's doing its transmit between two devices, and one may not be able to handle what the other side is doing. So they're your control mechanisms. So there's our runt frames, caused by collisions, giants. So that's when you start to play with the collisions in half, configured for full. So late collisions are again to do with your half and your fulls. So you can back those down. So hopefully that makes sense to people. You can do your show commands, show interfaces, which we've looked at. SSH we've set up, and we got that to function in packet tracer. I can try and set it up on the real switch. I'll have a break. I'll set it up and see if I can actually Wireshark into it. We configured a domain. We generated our keys. We did our user authentication. We did our transport. You can change it to version 2, which is obviously later and better. So you probably don't want your version to be set up as your version 1. Interestingly enough, your version, this is really tricky in a test. Let's see if you can see it. Yep. So we've gone and set up our username and password, our line VTY, our transport, our login local. The version sits outside of the line. It's not on the actual interface. It's run because it's a protocol. So it's actually the service is separate to the actual interface itself. Yes, they will ask you that and where that sits. So that helps you isolate and understand where you'll look for that. Then that's a useful thing. There's all our domain name, our crypto keys, and our modulus on those. Yes, you can regenerate your keys. That's no big issue. You just do it locally. Interestingly enough, you would probably never set your SSH on VLAN 1. VLAN 1 is your default VLAN. You just want to move it onto a different VLAN. You've got to look at natives and other things to do with VLANs as well. But it's more just to do with good practice and security, so you move them around. And the SVI, that means switch virtual interface. So it's not real, it's just a logical interface. So if you see SVI, you can understand it's your interface VLAN number. So just make sure that you have some knowledge of that process as well. We just set it as VLAN 1 because it was easy and generic. There's a little packet tracer for us, which we kind of sort of did. Securing unused ports. This is a bit more theoretical because the real world, you want to have stuff active and plugged in or able to plug in. And depending on who you are, it will know what to do with you. So shutting a port down just restricts really hard line what you can access. But normally this says, I will check your device, I'll check your Mac, and from your Mac, I'll go and work out which VLAN I'm going to put you into. And the VLANs will have restrictions on them so that you can and can't do certain things. And that allows better flexibility. So this is hard line, shutting it down, Department of Defense or somewhere. If you're in school and education, you actually, want people to plug in and get access when they need to. So the shutdown command works, and you can shut down multiple ports with a range command. So let's go and try that, see what we can do. Let's config it up. Let's go int question mark. And you can see I've got here the range command. And I can say I want FA0 /2 to say 10. And I've moved myself into an ability to move my ports from 2 to 10, and I'm in a range. I don't know if you guys did that in semester 1. You might have. And then I can do shutdowns. It changes all of those ports to shutdown. So you go and look at them. There's my port 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10 shutdown. Okay, port security. Do you want to have a break? Have a break for, say, 10 minutes, and we'll then jump into port security because it's its own separate sort of thing. You guys probably haven't touched that. How are we going? Do you want to keep going, or do you want to have a 10-minute break? Or have I put everybody to sleep? 10-minute break. Excellent. Just give me a little bit of feedback. How are we going from the point of view of basic config? Do you understand the hardware, where everything boots up, how to set your con, your telnet, your SSH, your host name, your domain name, your crypto keys? That's the big takeout from what we just did off our VLAN. If you guys are all over that, a bit of revision, or if it's new and it makes sense, that's excellent. Okay. You wouldn't have done any port security is my guess. Okay, port security is good fun. So let's say it's 7:30 now. Come back at, do you want to do 7:40 or 7:45? What works for people? 10 minutes or 15? We can come back at, say, 7:40. And I'll